So following our event in June, we wanted to pull together another conversation to create a safe space for reflecting on topics related to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Today, we're specifically focusing on how to have conversations about race and racial equity. As we have learned over the last several months, we found that what is really needed right now is education. Whether you identify as white, Black, brown, or any other beautiful color, it's too easy to turn those most affected to teach us about our own inequities when it comes to privilege, equity, justice, injustices, prejudice, etc. It's on each and every one of us to prepare ourselves to act with racial equity in mind. There are many resources available, and we hope to add some much needed value to the conversations and to our generation. So first, I would like to introduce Luis Sotelo. Luis is the Vice President for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at Doane University, where he leads a division to drive inclusion and belonging to achieve innovation, equity, and excellence in the global community. He is a teacher at heart and a champion of human potential. So I'll turn it over to Luis now.
Thank you, Bree, and thank you all for being here today. I'd like to introduce our presenters for this event. So we'll start with Dr. Amanda Irions, who is an Assistant Professor of Communication Studies at Doane University. Amanda Irions is an award-winning teacher and researcher who was born and raised in Nebraska. She earned a PhD from the University of Maryland and studies social catalyst and how culture affects relationships. Our next presenter, Shannon Mangram. Shannon is passionate about making a difference in the world around her. Right now, she is working at UNL in the University Honors Program as a coordinator of community engagement, retention, and recruitment. She is also creator of several honors workshops, including the Foundations of Emotional Intelligence, Managing Your Emotions, Leading with Empathy, and Genius Makers versus Genius Takers, Lessons in Teamwork. She also offers authentic intercultural competence coaching through administration of the IDI Assessment. And whether at her church, at her job, or in her community, Shannon desires to help people to live a better, wholesome life and will always take action to do so. Our third presenter, Kevin Reese. Originally from Dayton, Ohio, Kevin is a proud 2007 graduate of Kentucky State University, with a Bachelor of Arts in Public Administration and a 2013 graduate of North Park University, graduating with a Master of Science in Higher Education Administration. He is a proud financial and active member of Phi Beta Sigma Fraternity Incorporated and a charter member of the Rho Epsilon Sigma Alumni Chapter in Lincoln, Nebraska. Some of his hobbies include acting, reading, traveling, line dancing, public speaking, and karaoke. Kevin currently serves as the Director of Residence Life at Center College in Danville, Kentucky. And because of his previous work in diversity, inclusion, Kevin was awarded the 2019 Inspiring Excellence through Inclusion Award, presented by the Vice Chancellor of Student Affairs at UNL. Kevin is the founder of the Vision of Excellence Scholarship Program geared to African American males graduating from high school and attending college for the first time. Kevin is passionate about the education and success of young people in every area of their life. Kevin is also the founder of Two Soul Line Dancers, a line dance group based in Lincoln, Nebraska. Kevin is a proud, financially active member of the Kentucky State University National Alumni Association. He's also a proud 2018 graduate of the Leadership Lincoln Advocates Program. He lives by the motto that in whatever you do, that you strive to be excellent without excuse. So we're going to start and give every presenter about 5 minutes to frame our conversation. So we're going to start with Dr. Amanda Irions.
Thank you very much, Luis. And thank you very much to the YPG and the YNPN of Lincoln and all of your members for really hearing what is happening in our country right now and really taking some good, solid action in community-based ways to address that problem. So today I would like to talk about sort of two fundamental truths of human existence, as much as we can have truth in science, right? And how those two truths relate to what we do with our language and how we can use our language to sort of understand what's happening in the world around us. So the first fundamental truth of human existence is that humans take in millions of data points in a day. We take in stimuli left, right, and center, and we just do not have the time or the brain power to attend to each stimulus equally. As a result, we think about our feet in socks or our feet on carpet on the floor, right? You're thinking about it now because I've called your attention to it, right? You could probably tell me now, is your foot hot or cold? Is there a breeze on your foot? What does the carpet feel like? Is it resting gently on the floor? Is it resting firm, right? You can tell me all of that now, right? But you couldn't tell me that 5 minutes ago unless you really attended to it. Maybe the first time you put down a carpet, your feet could tell the difference because it was a new stimulus. But then through repeated exposure, your body was like, okay, this is the same thing. Your brain was like, okay, this is the same thing, and it's never going to threaten me because it's carpet. So you tune out that input, right? However, I don't know if you're like me in this regard, but I get hungry and it comes out of the blue. And when I get hungry, I get real hungry and I need to do something about it, right? And I will tell you right now that for me, attending to my hunger stimulus is a much higher priority than dealing with like my foot stimulus, right? But even though we treat stimuli unequally, we still need to make decisions about how to move through the world based on those stimuli. So our brains simplify the flow of incoming stimuli by using decision rules to help us organize, process, and respond to those incoming stimuli, right? A decision rule sounds like, oh, I feel chilly, I'll go grab a blanket, right? Oh, the stove is hot, I'll take my hand away and I'll recognize that there's something about this situation that can harm me in the future, so I don't put myself in that place again, right? So the first fundamental truth is about decision rules. The second fundamental truth comes from the idea that humans are social. And we are social in part because we rely on others to help us solve the basic problems of survival, right? This is you're finding food, you're making shelter, defending yourself from threats, and reproducing, right? Those are sort of the four big things that we think about doing. And one of the problems we faced again and again and again in, the tens of thousands of years of human history is how to find humans to trust as we go about doing these things, right? So how do we find humans who will help us gather food and will share it with us instead of stealing it all, right? How do we help us find humans to build a shelter for us or to build a shelter with us and not kick us out at the end of it? And so one of the psychological adaptations that humans have evolved in those tens of thousands of years of human history to help us quickly and reasonably accurately make decisions about whom to trust is similarity. Back then, similarity meant that our genetic fates were intertwined. Not so much now, right? But back then, we used to think of similarities as people who looked like us, still do. People who talked like us, still do. People who lived near us, still do. People who believed what we believed, maybe back then about how best to tend to the crops, like when to do the new moon ritual or whatever for the crop growth. And now it's like, oh, how do I spend my volunteering time, right? And so those bits of similarity tended to indicate to us that people who believed the same were similar or were trustworthy and we were safe around them. And it was a reasonably useful adaptation then, and it's a reasonably useful adaptation now because it means that we could quickly, reasonably accurately identify whom to look to for help. However, science also tells us that that similarity decision rule can be hijacked. And that's what we're talking about today. So instead of repeated experience determining who we think of as being safe or trustworthy, simply hearing repeated stimuli, repeated messages, being repeatedly told that certain groups of people are good or bad or worthy or unworthy can bias us for or against members of those groups. And so consider the example of racial groups, which is why we're here today. There is no reasonable scientific evidence indicating that different racial groups are inherently more or less trustworthy or violent or creative or underhanded or loyal or inferior simply because of their race. That there is no science that says that. Yet people still believe that, and people still act on that because they have learned through hearing repeated messages, taking in repeated stimuli, that is the case. And these repeated messages have turned into their decision rules. This is why we care about decision rules. One of the ways that we can begin to hear all of this is through the linguistic intergroup bias effect. And the linguistic intergroup bias effect happens when we use different language to talk about and make sense of what causes the good and the bad behaviors that we see from the people around us. Some of those people are similar to us, they're in our in-groups. Some of those people are different to us, they're in our out-groups. Race is one way to think about similarity, but really any way you can categorize people, religion, breakfast preferences are ways to think of similarity and difference. But with race, when we see someone who is similar to us, someone from our in-group, do something that results in a negative outcome or a suboptimal outcome, the linguistic intergroup bias effect shows that we tend to explain that behavior as an accident, as a one-off, as a result of some circumstances, where the constellations aligned at this one point in human history, and it will never happen again. However, science also shows us that when someone who is dissimilar to us, someone from our outgroup, does that same negative behavior, suddenly our language about it changes. And we explain that negative behavior as a result of a fundamental character flaw inherent to that person that will travel with them across time and across circumstance and across interactions. And that's what we have to watch out for. So what I'm asking you to do today is to listen very carefully to the explanations people create, the attributions they create when they try to make sense of people's behaviors. For example, when you think about someone coming late to a meeting, right? Listen to the language, because chances are, if the person who's running the meeting sees the latecomer as being in their in-group, you'll hear language that reflects it's an accident or something that is unlikely to happen again. So they might say, I'm sure that so-and-so doesn't mean to be late to the meeting again, but this time so-and-so was wrapping up a call, they'll be right here. However, if we hear the person who was running the meeting think that person is in their out-group, what we'll hear is, I'm sure so-and-so doesn't mean, or so-and-so is late again. I'm sure so-and-so doesn't mean to be so disrespectful to us, but here they are 5 minutes late again, right? And that's how the linguistic intergroup bias sounds at work when you're talking about something as small as lateness. It's the explanations people create, it's the attributions they use, and it's only when we begin to hear this subtle form of language that we can begin to challenge it. So that is what I'm asking you to do today. Really listen carefully and then take your challenges out to the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Irions. And I think we have our first call to action, probably of many this evening. Now we will move on to our next panelist, Shannon Mangram.
Hello, everyone. And I just want to thank Dr. Amanda. Wow, that was really helpful. I might have to contact you after this so you can come talk to our honor students here in the program. That is such an interesting way to, I guess, talk about how we really are talking to each other. So I'm actually going to share my screen quickly with you because I have some quick hits that I just want to give you all about intercultural competence. So I am an intercultural Intercultural Competence Coach, certified with the Intercultural Development Inventory, also known as the IDI. And so I just want to give you a little bit of definitions that we are able to use in that coaching to help you frame what is intercultural competence, why it matters, and in the terms that we hear so often that we often are adding, attributing meaning without actually knowing what they mean. So I'm going to go ahead and get going. So that's me, my little Bitmoji. My hair is pretty accurate. So let's keep going. So intercultural competence is defined as the ability to shift perspective and adapt behavior. And so when we're talking about intercultural competence, we're not just talking about intercultural competence without context. We're talking about it in the domains of the self and the other, and we're talking about the domains of differences and commonalities. And so intercultural competence is not just something that is external to a person, it is also very personal and internal. And I think that's just something that I wanted to highlight about intercultural competence. Sometimes people have more development they actually have to do about getting to know who they are, where they come from, instead of the other person. So that is intercultural competence, the ability to shift perspective and adapt behavior. I think every person has a level of intercultural competence. We just don't know how much we have. And that's why intercultural competence coaching is helpful. You are able to get an external perspective, but everyone has a little toolbox of things they do to interact with differences. And so what coaching can do and what any kind of exposure and reflection can do is give you more tools. And that's what I think we're all hoping to do today, is add more tools to your toolbox when it comes to handling situations that you find yourself in. So let's talk about diversity. Diversity is a mix of differences that matter. It is not a proxy for Black and brown people. And so if you're talking about diversity, there are so many things that make us different, right? It's not just our ethnicity, right? It's how we were raised. It's where we come from. It's there is so many factors that go into that. And so this is classified as the who. This is who we're talking about when we are trying to be more inclusive and create environments where all people can thrive. Inclusion. Inclusion occurs when people are working together effectively and differences feel valued and engaged. This is the what. This is what we're doing. This is what we're trying to do in our workplaces. This is what we're trying to help people understand. Oh, and sorry, Ashley, I can definitely share these slides with you if you'd like. I can definitely do that. But inclusion, it occurs when people are working together. And I think the thing here is the differences that exist feel valued and engaged. This is the what. So we've got diversity. That's the who. The people that are different around us. Inclusion, that's where the differences are starting to feel valued and engaged. And intercultural competence development is the how. So if you're wondering, how am I going to continue developing myself, right? Because I think it's really where it starts, right? We can't necessarily, I think, hope to change all of the things externally without looking inward, right? And figuring out how we can change ourselves. But intercultural competence development is the how. So creating spaces for others, giving the ability to not be afraid of differences, not perceive them as threats, asking questions. We'll talk a little bit about that, I'm sure, a bit later. Paying attention to language, as Dr. Irions was saying. All of those things are going to help. But it's this combination that I think of exposure and introspection, but not just any kind of introspection. Exposure and introspection, looking at your environment, what is different, what is in common, and then looking at yourself. Why am I behaving this way? Where does this behavior come from? So those are the quick hits. I just wanted to give that context for you. Let's just review briefly. Oh, I didn't mean to go that far. I just wanted to show everyone that picture again. So intercultural competence, the ability to shift perspective and adapt behavior. If you're thinking about any of things, think about your abilities. What are your abilities to shift perspective? What are your abilities to adapt behavior? That is all I have. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Shannon. I think you bring a really important perspective in encouraging us to understand that we all have a level of intercultural competence, right? We're not starting from zero. We all have that, but through coaching, through intentionality of those, that is how we grow. So that's the second call to action already is what are we doing to develop our intercultural competence? Our third speaker is Kevin Reese. Welcome.
It would help if I took myself off mute. That probably would help. Hello, everybody. Good evening. I am glad to see you all today. Thank you for the opportunity and the invitation to Dr. Amanda and to Shannon. They put me last, okay? And I'm coming behind two powerhouses. And so I hope that you're able to get something out of this. And I wanted to talk about a few things this evening. So I used to work at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, right? I've been gone from Nebraska a little over a week now, right? So I've settled in my new position. Things are going haywire and people are just all over the place, right? But I have to remind myself, when I was at Nebraska, we did this presentation. If you've ever seen it, it's amazing. It helps you to think from a different lens. But if you haven't seen it, it's called ouch. Okay, what's the first thing you say when you stub your toe in the middle of the night or you drop something on your foot? I dropped a can good on my foot when I was moving last week, and that wasn't the first word I said, but I thought about that, right? So ouch, stereotypes that hurt. And it was started by Dr. Leslie Aguilar. And the main premise of the presentation was learning how to communicate respectfully in a very diverse world. And I think that's one of the things that we struggle with, right? And that's my call to action for you all tonight, is learning how to communicate respectfully in this very diverse world. Shannon touched on the definition of diversity, and I just want to go over something. I think when people hear the word diversity, they only think about skin color. Okay, oh, she's black, oh, he's white, that's our diversity. But think about the difference in religion, your political beliefs, your hair color, your educational experiences, your social economic backgrounds. That's all a part of diversity. And so I was talking with my friends last week, and we were talking about how over the course of the last few, 3 to 5 months, we've seen companies start this woke washing. He calls it woke washing. And I said, well, what does woke washing mean? He said that these are companies who are getting involved only because of what's currently going on, right? They're not really in it for the long haul. He said, and I want to see who's going to be there, 6, 9, 12, 18 months from now when things are still going on and they're not just pandering for either the support of people of color or, their support or either their dollars, right? So Leslie Aguilar talks about this, communicating respectfully in a very diverse world. At Nebraska, for the last 4 years, I had the amazing privilege to host a conversation called Dish It Up, okay? Dish It Up is held every Tuesday from 12 to 1. And I want to give you the rules for Dish It Up, because as I would say the rules, you would see people on Zoom or even in person scratching their head or thinking about what I just said, right? And the rules are very simple, but sometimes it's the most simplistic things that cause us the most confusion, right? And so the rules for Dish It Up were really, really simple. The first one was to be respectful, okay? Not everyone feels, thinks, sees, or believes the world to be as you might feel, think, see, or believe the world to be. Number 2, you need to listen. My grandmother would always tell me, and so I'll reference my grandmother a lot because she gives me these little tenets every morning when she calls me at 6 a.m. Although I don't get up to 7:15, she calls me at 6 a.m. every day to give me some kind of tenet of wisdom. To listen. She said, Kevin, you have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason, to listen more and to talk less. Okay. And I would think about that and I would say, Kevin, as you go throughout your day, take a moment to listen more and to talk less. Like it sounds really simple, but have you ever just taken a moment just to be quiet and to listen to the sounds of the music, the language, the culture around you every day? So we're in such a rush as people, as people, that we don't take time to really value the diversity around us, right? Oh, that's just my friend. Yeah, she's a Muslim. Okay, great. Oh, that's my friend. He's Native American. Oh, that's my friend. She speaks Dutch. Have you ever taken the time just to listen to the things that go on around you? Because you learn so much from listening. People always say, if I was a fly on the wall, I'd want to learn this. Take a moment to be a fly on the wall, just to observe and to listen to the diversity around you. The third rule is to be open to the conversation. And that can be difficult, right? Because some people, when it comes to diversity and inclusion, you notice people, they clam up, they get really nervous, they get kind of angsty. I don't want to ask that question. It's the best time to ask questions. I was doing this presentation And this lady, a Caucasian lady, asked me, she said, I have a few questions for you. She said, I don't know how to ask this question. I'm kind of embarrassed. And I was like, well, you know, what question is it? And she says, you know, what does your hair feel like? And it caught me off guard because I was expecting like a presentation question or diversity and inclusion. She said, what does your hair feel like? And I said, well, it feels like hair. I was so confused. But then I thought, you know, she said, you're the first person I've ever seen up close with hair that looks like yours. You know, she said, can I touch it? I said, absolutely not. But you can admire from a distance. But she said, I just want to ask questions about, you know, why you started the journey. What does it mean to you? And for me, that meant a lot, that she was taking a moment to step outside of her everyday life to ask a question to get better knowledge. To me, that meant a lot to me. And the last rule is to engage in the conversation. Oftentimes when you talk about diversity and inclusion, you talk about institutional equity, people don't engage in the conversation either because they're nervous or they're scared or they just don't want to make a mistake. My call to action to you tonight is don't be afraid to make a mistake, right? That's how you learn. You know, if you say something wrong, hey, we're going to teach you tonight. That's the whole premise of these programs. You know, these Lincoln Young Professional Networks, Leadership Lincoln, you know, OASIS, or the Office of Diversity and Inclusion on campus at UNL. The purpose is to learn something, right? My grandmother would always tell me that, Kevin, you learn something new every day. She said, if you don't realize it now, as you get older, you'll see that. And so at the end of my day, I always take a moment to say, hey, Kevin, what did you learn new today? What did you learn new today? If you've never taken a moment at the end of your day, ask yourself, what did I learn new today? How can I learn how to be a better person today? Not only to those who look like me, but to those who might not look like me, they might have a different religion than me, might have a different political view than I do. How can I understand somebody else today, learn something new about somebody else without offense? So we're talking about those dish it up rules, right? And so I want to challenge you, okay? Again, my grandmother, she's the wisest person I know, right? She would always, when I was growing up, she would always say, Kevin, your life begins at the end of your comfort zone, okay? And I would always say, Grandma, that makes no sense, right? But as I get older, I realize that the more I stretch myself, that's when life truly begins. You see the value of people, okay? You go beyond your skin color, you go beyond your sky blue shirt and your blue tie, you go beyond those glasses, you go beyond the hairstyle, and you really learn who people are. You learn the experiences and how to value those, and then how to apply those to your own life. And so because you're stretching yourself, you'll see yourself begin to change, right? And I not only want you to challenge yourself to stretch outside that comfort zone, but challenge somebody else. Oftentimes we sit there in our own bubbles and our own squares, our own cubicles, and we don't challenge anybody to be better. Okay. Anybody who knows me knows when I have a birthday, I always title the year. It's like a chapter, right? And so this year I'll be turning 36, right? And so the chapter for this year is called Make Room. Okay. Make room for learning something new, learning a new hobby, learning a new skill, learning a new language. Kevin, make room for the very intentional encounters you'll have every day. Make room in your own mind, in your own thought process, in your own, on your own bias to learn something different, to be different, to challenge somebody else to be different, right? To think through a different lens. I always challenge people. I want you to sit back for a moment. Let's take away all your privileges and think about who you are. Take away your name and your degree. Take away all of that. And I want to know who you are. Take away all the things. Oh, I was the award winner in this year. I started this program. I did this. I did that. Take all that away and think about who you really are. And think about how that impacts the world. Some people say, I sat there for 10 minutes and I couldn't think of anything. So if you sat there for 10 minutes and you couldn't think of anything, that gives you a great opportunity to make room for something new. And I had to tell myself that. I said, Kevin, don't be afraid to learn something new. Oftentimes people are scared. Well, what if I fail at it? What if I fail? If you fail, then you can fail forward. Okay? Because if you don't fall down, you'll never be able to get back up. They say that falling down is life, but getting back up is living. And I need you to fall down. And don't be afraid to fall down. If you scrape your knee, that's called a scar, right? But when scars heal, it's a story behind that. Don't be afraid to have a story. I want you to add value to the spaces that you're in, that you slide past, that you see every day. I want you to add value to those spaces. A lot of people say, well, I don't want to offend anybody. I don't want to, ruffle any feathers, or I don't want people to think I'm a stick in the mud. Let them think whatever they're going to think. But every day, challenge somebody else. Challenge them. I challenge my friends every day. Right? If you're around people who don't challenge you, you're not going to grow as an individual, as a thinker, as a leader, as an expert. You're not going to grow if people are not challenging you every day. As I close, we've learned this term, and my boss always chooses their words very carefully. And I'm thinking about how I want to phrase it. We've learned this term over the last 2 years, and we've kind of coined it at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. It's called inclusive excellence, right? Dr. Marco Barker and Charlie Foster and Karen Katzman have been working on this, inclusive excellence. And if you don't know what inclusive excellence is when an institution or an organization adopts means for the cohesive, coherent, and collaborative integration of diversity, inclusion, and equity into institutional or organizational fabric, all for the pursuit of excellence. So I'm going to ask you today, as you sit on this call, think about how you contribute every day to inclusive excellence. How are you helping to dismantle some of those systematic racisms at your place of employment or your institution? What are you doing every day to help that fabric of inclusive excellence? How are you building into? How are you contributing to the branding of this fabric of inclusive excellence wherever you are? Whether it's professional, personal, spiritual, how are you contributing every day to the thought of inclusive excellence? That's what I'm going to leave you with. Thank you so much. Those are my thoughts.
Thank you, Kevin. Well, there we have it. The third call to action in terms of, being able to allow ourselves to, as you said, Kevin, fail forward. If we want to get better at having these conversations about race and reaching inclusive excellence, we are going to have to take a level of risk as well, for some more than others, to be able to achieve that. So thank you for your words, Kevin. So at this time, we're going to open it up for about 10 minutes for questions from any of you. So if you want to type your question, or if you already have a question in mind, we will invite you to unmute yourself and ask the question to any of our wonderful, brilliant speakers this evening. So we'll dedicate the next 10 minutes to uncovering more of your questions and what our speakers have to say about that.
Hi, I have a question. So my name is Marlena. And when we talk about diversity and inclusion, it's kind of this broad topic. For organizations or groups, what do the presenters suggest for actionable steps or tangible things that organizations can do to be more diverse and inclusive?
So I'll just go ahead and start, because I answered a similar question about 6 hours ago. So I'm full, everything's on the surface. So I won't take also too long. But the question came up in the context of a reading about microaggressions. And one of the examples that really stuck out for somebody was, I didn't realize that saying, I just want to hire the best qualified person for the job was an example of a microaggression, right? And so I was like, well, it's not that we want to hire unqualified people. That's not the point of this, right? We believe in the places we work. We want to hire people who can advance that, right? But the idea there is, okay, well, what do we think of when we think about listing the qualifications, right? What do we think of when we think of as Kevin was saying, do you need to have a particular degree, or can we think about an equivalent experience with that, right? When you think about posting that job ad, where do you post that job ad, right? Is it in places that only a narrow band of people tend to look? For example, the classified section of the newspaper is great, right? But a narrow band of people reads that, right? We also think about, with job ads, for example, saying to our friends and our networks, oh, hey, we're looking for someone who can do this, this, and this. Do you know anybody? And if all of your friends look like you and think like you, and you go to the same meetings or you do the same volunteering experiences, that's not going to travel very widely. So it really is about you, not you personally, right? But all y'all intentionally going out and finding places that are outside of the places you normally go, right? So if you think about going to UNL's students, because I know they have 8 million student groups, right? There are absolutely computer science groups, right? Get in there and talk with all of the people who go to those groups, right? Take the next step of asking the advisor or a computer science professor about, are there, really interested students or really passionate students who don't necessarily get the opportunities that other students get because they don't look like your typical computer science major, right? So it really is about proactively, as Kevin said, going beyond your comfort zone, going beyond your network to reach out.
I would love to chime in next. Marlena, hello. Marlena and I serve on a couple of committees together, so good to see you again today. So my comments are kind of pulling out a little bit of my grad program. I'm in a leadership education grad program, and I believe that a lot of it starts with leadership. It starts with buy-in from leadership and understanding not only that they want to take steps forward, but that they really do understand the nuance and all of the different things that have to do with developing inclusive excellence. And so, I mean, and that's not to say that if you're not at the top of an organization, you can't affect change. But I think the biggest changes are affected by support and led by people who are executives or administrators or whatever. And so I think, though, if you do find yourself in a position where you're not at the top and you're wondering, okay, I can't force this upon my organization, you can start looking at, and this is where I just would encourage you potentially to look inward and go deep enough to see, where is culture? Where has culture shaped your behavior? Where has culture potentially caused you, if you are in a minority group, to hide your differences or gloss over them? Or, I guess one example for me is I have gone natural recently. I have my natural hair recently, but I wasn't always that way. I had straight hair for a really, really long time. And it's not that straight hair is a bad thing, but for me, it was a personal, I wasn't able to accept something about myself. I didn't want to stand out in a way. And so me wearing my natural hair is an acceptance of myself, an acceptance of a difference that I have, right? And so there are lots of talk about professionalism and natural hair, but we don't need to get into that today. But there are so many things that looking inward can do. So for example, if you work in HR, looking at the policies and seeing where is culture in your policies? We can give an example of like the monochronic, polychronic example. Being on time is a monochronic arena of living. And I am a recovering polychronic in a monochronic world, which means, so monochronic are the people who say, being on time is being 5 minutes late and 5 minutes early is being on time. They've got schedules, agendas. They're going from, agenda item to agenda item with a lot of times. Polychronic are the other side of the spectrum. I would consider my mom a polychronic person. She says dinner's going to be ready at 2 p.m. We know it's a lie. It's not going to be ready until 4 or 5. But we know that, right? And time is relative and fluid. And so looking deep, I would say, looking at policies, looking at that, but also maybe even looking at yourself to say, okay, if I'm uncomfortable, am I not even taking the time to potentially understand a cultural why, right? If you can understand a cultural why behind a behavior, you actually take a little bit of the bite out of a difference. If you take some time to really look into it, dig deep, okay, say, what is actually going on here? What is going on in a collectivistic culture? What is going on in an individualistic culture? What are the pros? What are the cons? I mean, and we do this all very quickly in our brains. And I think Dr. Irions can maybe tell us a little bit more about how quickly we do this in our minds. But But again, it's taking the actual time, doing what Kevin has said, making room to mentally process these things. Because that's the other thing. At the university, there are lots of priorities. And if you do not make it a priority, it will not be one. And that's just it. If you do not make space, make room, make space to mentally process yourself and your policies, it won't happen. And that's just the reality. So those are my thoughts.
Marlene, thank you for the questions. As you were asking your question, like I get inspired like to write. As I got my notepad here, thinking like, how I can respond to your question. But I guess tagging off Dr. Amanda, she talked about buy-in from your leaders, or it might have been Shannon, buy-in from your leadership, right? If everyone, when I was growing up in church, they would always say, if everyone in the church acted like you, what kind of church would it be? Now, I know you might say, well, okay, well, that's my boss, and I'm just a secretary, I'm just a program coordinator, I'm just a assistant director, whatever your title may be. But think about those, in challenging those who lead you, right? Leaders are supposed to help us grow, okay? That's a part of their job, to help us grow. So if you've been here as my leader for 25 years and nothing has changed, that's what they call stagnation, okay? And so I'm here, I'm bringing my skills, my gifts, my talents, my abilities to help this thing move along. One of my best friends, and I saw Laura comment something similar to this when she talked about, well, I don't want to say anything, or, I don't have the time today. What if everybody around us said, oh, I don't have the time today to deal with that? Nothing would ever get done. And so I'd be in some meetings, and at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, sometimes, and I'm sure Shannon can attest to this, and pretty sure Dr. Amanda, sometimes I'd be the only Black person in the room, okay? Only person of color in the room, and they ask a question, and I give my thought process, and the answer is just kind of glossed over. And I was like, well, maybe they didn't hear me. I'm pretty sure and then it comes back like 5 minutes later, well, we could do. I said, I just said that 5 minutes ago. That's exactly what I just said 5 minutes ago. But then I think, what if I didn't say anything? I'm in this room for all those persons who don't have the ability to be here. For the people of color, for the other marginalized populations. So if I don't say anything, what's going to happen? If I don't use my platform, my privilege today, who's going to fall by the wayside because I decided, well, I don't have time today? What if somebody said that in your development? I don't have time to help develop you today, help you grow. So I would say to challenge those, don't lose your job now, okay? But challenge those respectfully who lead you and who pay you to be great, right? You didn't bring me here just to sit here. You brought me here because of my acumen or my skills or my strengths, right? Allow me to showcase those and help you grow. So that's my answer.
I would just want to say one more thing about that. Challenge, because sometimes it can be hard if you are in a position where you are talking to a leadership figure and you're saying, okay, how can I get my point across without getting fired? or without being pegged as someone who is going to always, play the diversity card, right? And so I think one way, and this is just another tool that I think would be to put in your little intercultural competence toolkit, but asking questions. Why, asking questions and seeing if you can get to, yes, Kyle, push but not too hard, asking the question to see if you can honestly even parse out what the reasoning is, and then make a connection based off of the value behind the reason. And that is, again, I think we really are all run by values, and our values affect the behavior that we have. And so if you can connect with a value, that's a good thing. You just have to understand and maybe dig a little bit deeper. And that's one way that you can do that.
Shannon, it's very interesting. When I first got to Lincoln, and I don't know any better way to say this, but there are only a few African-American men that you see that are serving in nonprofit roles, right? And so you get put on every board, every committee, every task force. Oh, he can do it. He can do it. And you'd be like, okay, wait. I got to this board meeting, okay? Again, and I am very transparent. It doesn't bother me. I got to this board meeting and I was the only person of color and the only man too. And so I got there and they said, Kevin, how do we reach Black people? And I'm sorry, like, I mean, it's my first day. First off, it's my first meeting with you. I don't even know who you are, but what does your strategy look like? You know? And I said, well, I want to talk to the board chair after we get done with this meeting, because first off, that was, you know, don't call people out like that, because then you get the most transparent answers, and you might not want to hear. But after our conversation, I said, you know, I said, what is your thought about diversity and inclusion? She said to me, she said, well, I mean, I guess it's important. I mean, you know, but we have other things to worry about. If that's how you feel as a leader, then I'm a bit concerned. This might not be for me. You know, we just like when you're at a job interview, they say that you're interviewing, but you're also interviewing them, right? To make sure that your values and your thoughts line up with my values and my thoughts, right? Because if they don't match up, we're gonna be unyoked. What they say, we're not gonna be equally yoked, right? And so I don't want to be anywhere where I'm not in a place to be able to give my my thoughts respectfully, right? And if you have a leader who is committed to growth and inclusion, they won't mind hearing your thoughts and hearing you grow. You know, and that's what I appreciate. But if you're in a space that you can tell, you know, hey, this might not be the time for me to speak up, it might be the time for you to find something else. And I know people are like, well, that's crazy, but it's also crazy to stay in a place where what do they say? What do they say that I can't think of the word, and it's on top of my head. But when they say that when you do something over and over again, oh gosh, insanity. It's insanity to sit somewhere where you see your values and your beliefs are not being put into play, where they don't match up. That's insanity. So why sit in an insane situation with all that intelligence? Okay, I'm done. I promise I'm done.
All really good points. And just because this is something I do day in, day out as well, I have to make a quick statement on this question as well. Let's start really pushing for systemic change, because too often we are fed these like, well, we'll put this program together and somehow, you know, now we're going to have the diversity that we seek, or let's start. And regardless of where you are in the organization, know that you have influence to start asking these questions of how we are pushing a system along, not just, you know, isolated, scattered events within organizations, but how are we actually pushing the system along to achieve this inclusive excellence? I'll get off my soapbox now. There is a question by Kyle here. He asks, what tips do you have to increase exposure to these difficult conversations or just discomfort in general? Thinking scientifically, what are some easy ways to condition ourselves?
You can stay on that soapbox. I'm so sorry. You can stay on that soapbox all night long, because I can jump around the soapbox and add my liquid powder to it. Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to say I heard the word science, so my ears pricked up. Right? I'm talking about decision rules, right? Incoming stimuli. You're not going to like you may like the answer. A lot of you are not going to like the answer. You just do it, right? As I saw earlier in the chat. You know, the point was raised, oh, I don't have time. And then someone said, no, it's not an issue of having time. You have the time that you make, right? You prioritize the things that you care about. And so if you care about having these kinds of difficult conversations, you have the difficult conversations, because that's how you prioritize your values, right? As Shannon was saying, you know, and sometimes people don't like hearing that how they spend their time is a reflection of what they value. But that's, I mean, how else we decide to spend our time, right? It's the same thing with spending money. We spend money on the things that we value, right? And so if you want to read a whole lot about this, right? You know, there's a lot about social learning theory and self-efficacy, and specifically the piece about self-efficacy from Bandura is the idea that and they did a whole lot of exposure studies, right? You know, people used to be afraid of snakes, and then they can hold a snake, right? And it's a great day. Or they used to be afraid of spiders, and they held it, right? And they didn't just go from being terrified of like legged or non-legged creatures to like embracing them that day, right? It was a series of slowly increasing steps, right? So one day it was just sit across the room from a picture of a spider. The next day, the picture's 5 feet closer. You know, the day after that, the picture's 5 feet closer, and there's a little bit more detail, right? And it's a series of planned, controlled interactions with a difficult thing that gives you the self-efficacy to believe that you can do it again, or that you can believe that you can do something even more difficult next time, really. And that self-efficacy is a key idea here, because it's not just desensitization, right? Because like a desensitization only program is just like a recipe for, no friends and trauma, and nobody wants that, right? But a desensitization plan with the idea of building some self-efficacy, this belief that I can do this next little step. I can do the next little step after that, right? I might not say, hey, in a meeting with all of my bosses and the board, this was a really unjust thing that just happened, and let me tell you all the reasons why. But you can email afterward someone you trust and say, hey, did you hear this thing I heard? Right? You can talk to your boss, and say, hey, there's something I heard in this meeting and it really didn't sit right with me. Can you give me some more background about like what else was there, or was that just it, right? So it really is a series of small steps that build efficacy.
I love that. Just take the next step. You don't have to solve racism right now. I mean, every little action, I think, adds to the larger development of everyone. So I love that so much. Thank you, Dr. Amanda. I think, maybe how I would frame it, and this is probably just how I'm looking at it, but I think it's a growth mindset type of thing. If you're looking at it, I think it's similar to what Kevin was talking about. If you're afraid to fail, you are looking at it as in the sense of it's very like zero-sum game almost. It's like a really finite way to think about it, because it's saying, if I offend someone, I lose. And the reality is, because we're learning, we are all learning, we all have the ability to make these mistakes. And so I think it's just maybe saying, I'm learning, that was something I didn't know, and not beat yourself up about it, and say, okay, now I've added this to my database, I've added it to my toolkit, if I want to stick with that. But again, it's just, I think the way, we shouldn't look at discomfort in this area and look at it as a bad thing. This discomfort is the way we move forward, and it's how we grow. So whenever you're feeling discomfort, you should be like, yes, I'm uncomfortable. This is great. Why am I uncomfortable? And that's where you start doing that introspection, because you've been exposed, right? It's I believe the combination of exposure and introspection, because you've been exposed. Now you have to take it apart. Where are the differences? Where are the commonalities? How is it affecting you? Why is it affecting you? Do you have this value? That's, again, taking it apart, I believe, is part of it. But again, I think that's a little thing that you can also do, just changing the mindset of how you even see the whole area of discomfort.
Can I just jump in quickly? I saw in the chat as Shannon was talking that Ashley said, it's not that I'm afraid to fail, it's afraid of loss, afraid to lose something, afraid to lose someone, right? And that ties in exactly to what Shannon was saying about a growth mindset, right? Like when you grow, you change, right? And Luis, bless his heart, has heard me be much more blunt and much less diplomatic in several meetings. So I'm gonna try my real best here, right? But the idea is that, I honestly lost several close friends this summer because our values did not align on justice and equality specifically for Black people in this country. I didn't realize that until it happened this summer, right? But the issue of, am I afraid to lose something, right? If I had stayed there, if I had acted on the I'm afraid of loss, I would still be in relationships with people who turned out to be secret racists. I don't want to surround myself with racists, right? And so for me, it was, again, I needed to think about what I valued in life, right? And there was, we had conversations, I said what I could say, and ultimately it came down to they were perfectly happy to benefit from their place in our society that privileges and benefits people for being white, for happening to be white, right? And so if you'd like a more gentle way of thinking about this, right? Like Kevin just went back to Kentucky, right? That's change. And when you go travel necessarily implies leaving something behind. Like that's what travel is, right? You have to go someplace, to do a new thing, to have new experiences, and you necessarily have to leave the old place, right? It doesn't mean you forget it. It doesn't mean you don't value it. It doesn't mean you don't appreciate the people who are there, but you need to leave it to move forward. So I understand why people like seize up when they think about loss, but you need to have the next step of thinking, what does this loss actually mean for me? What am I losing? What am I gaining? And how do my choices about what to gain and what to lose align with my values?
You know, Dr. Amanda, I had a very similar experience with some of my friends. I mean, I have a white friend who I've known all my life, right? I mean, like literally all of my life. And, you know, I would always think it was odd that he never posted about, you know, anything dealing with, you know, Black Lives Matter, or, you know, now you are a higher education professional who should have a mindset to be inclusive, you know, because you work at a very inclusive institution. Didn't have that. So I asked him this summer, I said, well, you know, you never post about anything, you know, because I had gotten off Facebook for a while. I just got tired of seeing George Floyd. Every 5 seconds it was being plastered. I just couldn't ingest anymore, right? Like seeing that video every 5 seconds on CNN, MSNBC, Fox, I just couldn't do it. And so I said, why don't you ever say anything? He said, listen, if Black people would just do what they were supposed to do and listen to the cops. And it was like, I said, no, wait a minute. Now, Kevin, before you respond, take about 7 seconds and just think about what's going to come out of your mouth. Okay. And I said, okay, I'm going to be diplomatic. I'm going to be professional about this. I said, no, I'm not going to do that. I said, so when someone's knee is on my back, okay, or I'm in a headlock and I can't, and I'm in cuffs and I can't do anything else, and I'm listening to police and I still end up dead, how does me not listening help? But so after you said you're afraid to lose someone or to lose something. There's a quote that says that sometimes people leave our lives sooner than we had hoped, right? But if they stayed longer, we wouldn't have got what we're supposed to get out of this situation. Okay? It's a reason, season, or a lifetime. We learned that in 6th and 7th grade. It's some people are there for a reason, a season, and a lifetime. Whatever the reason is, help me to get it so you can go when you have to. If the season is short, I got all that I was supposed to get or I was supposed to give to you from that situation. Okay? If, like Dr. Amanda said, if your values are no longer lining up, it's not a loss. It's a gain for you, right? Because now it's bringing you down. Because what they say, you're guilty by association. So if Sarah has a racist mindset, they're going to look at you. Well, actually, how do you feel about it? And, and our presentation talks about silent collusion, right? And I know people don't ever think about that, right? If you're sitting there and I say, all Native Americans are alcoholics, or all, Black people are on welfare. If I say something like that and you don't say absolutely anything, your silence tells me everything I need to know. Just like our friends and people who are our friends, okay? Some people are just associates, and I think we kind of throw that friend label too easily. If you're afraid of losing people who have negative values and who can drag you down, I need you to let that feeling go tonight, okay? Because you don't want anybody bringing your brand down. That's the easiest way that I can say it.
I think I just want to add one more thing. So I think Ashley brings up a really good point about really being afraid to lose someone. And so I think there are a couple of people you could lose. The people that we were talking about as associates that, if you're kind of grouped in with them, it's not really a good thing, but also the people that you offend. And so maybe it would be beneficial to talk about what happens when you do offend someone. Because again, sometimes it happens. And if you're in a place where you had an understanding that wasn't complete, right? And because the reality is we kind of all grew up without, and in our school systems, without a good understanding of the ethnic experiences in our country. But if you grew up without that experience, it's not your fault, right? You weren't the teacher. You didn't make that decision. Ibram X. Kendi says that sometimes white people are the victim and the victimizer. And so, but once you become aware of something, you can make the changes, but sometimes you still have to go back and apologize. If you do make a mistake, and you do offend someone or you make a generalization that's not okay, just own up. Own up to the mistake. I would potentially even talk to the person who you may have offended individually, because as you're moving forward, it's nice to have a plan, right? Write out something even that you could say to someone who you potentially have offended and seek to reconcile. Because again, I have been in so many work positions where if someone would have said, Shannon, I'm so sorry that I singled you out, or Shannon, I'm so sorry that this made you feel, can you tell me more about, if they did that, it would have changed the entire experience for me, because it's about inclusion. If we want to go back to the definitions, that the differences are valued, they're valued, right? And so, if you step on someone's toes, value the difference, go back, correct it, and don't take it as I'm a terrible person, we make mistakes. Forgive yourself and move on.
Kyle, you posted, and I want to answer your comment. You talked about the seat at the table and how about pushing up against the things that prop you up. If you're propped up on things that are not just or not equitable, then you're not on good, solid foundation, right? And in an effort not to butcher your name, I'm gonna say commenter Agrawal. Okay, I don't want to butcher your first name. Kyle, you said, well, what about this? Is how I interpret it. Now, if I'm wrong, let me know, right? You said, well, what if I lose my seat at the table? Well, then build another table. I don't know who it was, maybe Dr. Amanda or Shannon. They said, when love is no longer being served at the table, it's time to move on to the next table. I've heard that somewhere recently, and I don't know who said that, but we have to be thoughtful first, but we have to be able to say, you know what, hey, this table is not where I need to be. Yes, I know it speaks to all my privileges, it speaks to everything that I have, but what about those folks who don't have, right? Like, how am I using my platform every day to speak up for someone else? Yes, it's going to be difficult, okay? Yes, it might hurt a little bit. But at the end of the day, I look back and say, you know what? Hey, I might have helped that person. I know I didn't say the right thing, but hey, I might have helped that person today. I know I walked away from this job, but I helped somebody today because of using my platform for the betterment. Okay.
And I just want to acknowledge the level of vulnerability and courage that we are sharing, right, in this space. Thank you for that, because that level of also humility is what is required to make the progress that we so need in our society. So that cannot go unsaid. Thank you for everyone who is being vulnerable and sharing. And hopefully you're finding that as you're having these feelings and your thoughts, you are not alone. There's plenty of individuals who have mentioned, I also have this fear, right? And knowing that you're not alone does allow you to lift some of that weight off so that you can move forward. You can fail forward, as we've been told and shared with today. On that point, grief, page 70, applying the stages of grief to the grief and loss of racism. You can read some more on this. The Racial Healing Handbook has a lot of different activities, and I was not paid to do this, but this book has been extremely helpful for many of my colleagues, for myself, and it goes into what we've just been discussing into greater length. There is a quick question that I want to move us into that was posed earlier on in the chat, and that is, how do you recognize changes that need to be made?
I always say, look at the injustices that you see, right? Are things equal where you're at? So when I work at the university, right? And I worked at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, right? And we noticed that some things weren't right for African-American students, even for Hispanic and Latinx students, right? And so I said, we have to make some very necessary changes. And one of the people said, well, they came here, so they should be good with whatever we give them. And I said, that's an interesting thought. I said, but you were given everything that you have. You didn't earn any of that, so why not be able to provide them the same level playing field? If you see things are inequitable, that's how you know it's time to make some change. or your values don't line up, that we need to change these things. Or if you hear language or, conversations, communication that you know is not right, that's how you know it's time to make some changes.
I'll chime in next. Because I think, yes, if you see something, you should say something. That's just, I feel like, that applies to definitely all kinds of situations. But I would ask the question, who is missing? Who's missing from the table? Who's missing from the conversation? Who's missing from the leadership team? Are you getting a well-rounded perspective from everyone? That's, I think, one of the best ways to see where you have gaps. I think the other thing, I think we talked about this a little bit earlier, is do you know the people you work with? Do you know what they value? Do you know what differences are even in the room? If you don't know that, there's no way that you're going to know what changes need to be made. There's just no way, because you're not going to understand what people value, and you're not going to understand. So I would say get an understanding of who you're working with, know what they value, maybe find ways to connect over those values, and talk about it. But again, if you're working in a place and you don't know the people, or you only sit with the people who are like you, or you're in a very comfortable place, maybe it's just time to get uncomfortable and get to know your workplace, get to know your workplace values, and ask the question, who's missing or what is missing?
And don't forget to add on, why is this missing? Who or
That's
what?
right, Kevin.
Why is it missing? You have a wealth of all this talent. Why is it missing? I think Dr. Amanda alluded to it earlier, talking about when people share job posts with their circle, right? People always say the best way to affect change is to bring in a pair of outside eyes, right? Bring in somebody who, may not have all the experience, but they have another valuable skill set, right? If they're a visionary, but they don't know the system very well, bring them in. Maybe they can help you understand how it can be more, how it can be better for everyone, right? Why are they missing? I just want to tag that on.
All right. We are coming up against time that we promised you all that we would only take up until 6:15. So can you all, in your own ways that you've learned how to show your love and appreciation over Zoom, which at some points it looks and maybe sounds awkward sometimes, but we all celebrate you for your unique selves. So can we thank our wonderful speakers, Dr. Amanda, Shannon, Kevin. Thank you so much for the wisdom that you have provided us this evening. And if you're feeling what I'm feeling, which is this evolution from where we started and where we are now, and you feel empowered and inspired in new ways, don't let that energy die. Keep that momentum so that you can continue those conversations in your respective friend groups, with your families, within your workplaces, and allow that hunger to fuel those actions that are going to allow us to dismantle racism and more comfortably, once we get through the discomfort, deal with how to have effective and productive conversations about race. So thank you all. We are going to have a little closeout from Bree, but thank you for joining us. And it's through your work and what you do every single day. It's not just a one-time thing, but what you do every single day and every minute of your life that we are going to help make Lincoln a much more inclusive, anti-racist place that practices anti-racism, in a place where more of us can belong and thrive in this community.
I truly could not have said it better than that, Louise. So thank you. And thank you so much to all of our speakers. I know I had so many aha moments and so many to-do things now and action items. So this was just amazing. We are sorry that we didn't do the breakouts. We just felt that this panel was way too good, and we just wanted to hear all of the wise words that you guys were telling us. So I did put a link for a list of resources. This is also going to be, well, it has been recorded, and we're going to edit it and share it out so you can rewatch it like I plan on doing many times, or you can share it out as well. We will definitely be emailing out those resources as well as putting them on our Facebook page, but just thank you so much, and let's keep the conversations rolling. And we are going to be planning to have another event kind of building off of this within the next couple of months. So thank you so much, everyone, for attending. If you want to stay around and chat, we'll be here, but if not, thank you so much and have a great night.